The night smelled like rain and regret. My son kissed my cheek, said, "Goodbye, Mom." I thought it was just another cold word between us. I didn't know he'd already poured the gasoline. When the fire roared through my home, I wasn't screaming, I was remembering every lie, every dollar, every time I called it love when it was really control. He thought he was burning a house, but he was forging a woman who'd stopped begging to be loved. So when he opened that door and saw me standing there alive, his face went pale, because for the first time in his life, he finally saw what justice looks like, and it looked a lot like his mother. The clock above my stove ticked too loud that night. Maybe it was always that way, but when you live alone long enough, even time starts making noise. I poured my chamomile tea into the chipped blue mug Marcus gave me on my 55th birthday. The one that said "World's Strongest Mom" in fading gold letters. The handle had a small crack, just like everything else around here. Still worked, though. So did I. Outside, Atlanta's summer air pressed heavy against the windows. The cicadas were screaming, the kind of song that sounds like static when you're tired. My house wasn't much, just a little one-story cottage on the east side, but it had soul. The wallpaper in the hallway still smelled faintly of lemon polish. The curtains were lace like my mama used to sew, and the floors creaked when you walked from the living room to the kitchen. That creak had followed every step of my son's childhood. I used to love that sound. I was rinsing my cup when my phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus again. My heart always did a small flip when I saw his name, even now, even after all the distance and the clipped phone calls. "Hey, baby," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "Hey, Ma," he answered. His tone was polite, flat, the kind you use with a coworker you don't plan to see after 5. "Just checking you took your meds." "Yes, doctor," I teased. "Why, you worried about your old mama?" A pause. "Just making sure everything's fine. Tanya said she smelled gas when she dropped off those groceries last week." "You get that checked?" "Already did," I lied. I hadn't smelled a thing since that night. Just one faint whiff near the stove, gone before I could find where it came from. "Good," he said. "You know, maybe it's time you move somewhere safer. Tanya's been looking at assisted living places in Decatur. Nice ones. Private bathrooms, game nights, all that." I laughed, but it came out dry. "Baby, I've been taking care of other people longer than you've been alive. I don't need anyone setting my bedtime now." He sighed the way young people do when they think they're being patient with the elderly. "It's not like that, Ma. Just think about it, okay? Anyway, I gotta run. I'll swing by tomorrow night." "All right, sweetheart." He hesitated, then said, "Love you." But it sounded rehearsed. "Love you more," I whispered to the dead line. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. There used to be warmth in his voice, back when we'd sit on this same couch and watch thunderstorms roll through, when he'd squeeze my hand during the loud cracks. But somewhere between college loans and Tanya's shiny real estate dreams, something in him cooled. Maybe success had its own kind of frostbite. I walked through the house, checking the locks like I always did. Habit more than fear. My knees complained, but I'd learned to ignore them. In the hallway, the framed photos glimmered under the low lamp. Marcus in his graduation gown, Marcus holding his firstborn daughter, my granddaughter, whom I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Tanya said they were too busy. I touched the frame gently, tracing his smile. "You used to look at me like that," I murmured. Something metallic hissed softly from the kitchen. I turned, heart jumping. The heater again? I followed the sound, bare feet whispering over the linoleum. Everything looked normal. The pilot light steady, the air calm, but that faint scent of gas returned, thin as a secret. I opened a window just in case, letting the humid night creep in. The air outside carried honeysuckle and rain. A storm was building somewhere far off. I could taste it in the pressure. Sitting down, I turned on the small TV. The preacher on Channel 7 was talking about forgiveness. "You can't plant bitterness," he said, "and expect peace to bloom." I smiled a little. I'd spent 35 years nursing the sick, wiping brows, holding hands of strangers who took their last breaths, calling for mamas who never came. I'd forgiven more people than I could count. But forgiving your own blood, that was a different kind of medicine. Harder to swallow. A knock rattled the front door. It startled me enough that I spilled some tea on my lap. When I opened it, Tanya stood there, makeup perfect, smile tighter than her curls. "Evening, Miss Loretta," she said sweetly. She never called me Mom. "Evening, Tanya. Didn't expect you." She held up a brown paper bag. "Marcus wanted me to drop this off. Some pie from that new place downtown. Tell him thank you." She looked past me into the house like she was checking something. "You should really get that wiring looked at. Old houses like this, fire hazards waiting to happen." I folded my arms. "This house raised a good man. It'll hold up a while longer." Her smile didn't move her eyes. "Of course." She turned to leave, heels clicking on the porch. Over her shoulder, she said, almost to herself, "Wouldn't want anything." Tragic. The screen door slammed before I could ask what she meant. I stood there a long moment, the bag of pie growing heavy in my hands. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low, like a warning rumble from heaven. I went inside, set the pie on the counter untouched, and locked the door twice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind picked up, whistling through the window cracks, carrying a faint smell of gas again. I got up, checked every burner, every valve. Nothing. Maybe Tanya was right. Maybe old houses were just tired like their owners, leaking memories, creaking under the weight of years. Still, before I lay down, I whispered my usual prayer. "Lord, keep my child safe," then softer, "and keep me safe from whatever he's become." The light from the street lamp stretched across my floorboards like orange fire. Trembling, and for the first time in my life, that quiet house didn't feel like home. It felt like a match waiting to be struck. Morning came gray and heavy, like the sky hadn't decided whether to rain or just sulk. I sat on the porch steps with my coffee and watched the neighborhood wake up, garbage truck growling. Mrs. Daniels walking her poodle in that pink sweater she swears the dog loves. Children chasing buses with half-tied shoes. Life carried on, polite and ordinary. But my house smelled faintly of something burnt that wasn't coffee, and that ordinary didn't reach me. Marcus pulled into the driveway right on cue, 9 a.m. sharp, as predictable as a bank deposit. He was always punctual when he wanted to manage me. He stepped out of his black SUV, phone glued to his hand, suit too crisp for a casual visit. "Morning, Ma." "Morning, baby." I wiped my hands on my apron. "You hungry?" "I made grits and eggs." He shook his head. "Can't, meeting in 30. His eyes darted toward the house. "You smell that?" "I do." He frowned, sniffed again, then shrugged. "Probably the wiring. Tanya keeps saying we should get this place rewired or, His voice trailed off, waiting for me to fill the gap. "Or sell it." I asked softly. He smiled like a salesman. "You said it, not me. I'm just saying the market's good. You could move closer to us. Less maintenance, safer." "Safer," I repeated. "I've been safe here 40 years. He gave me that polite, frustrated look people give old folks they can't reason with. I'd seen it 1,000 times on hospital interns. "Ma, nobody's saying you're not capable. We just think you deserve comfort." I leaned against the porch rail, letting the boards creak under my weight. "Comfort don't come from square footage, Marcus. It comes from peace." He exhaled hard through his nose, thumb still swiping on his phone. "You always gotta turn everything into a sermon." "That's 'cause you never stay long enough to hear the hymn." His mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile, or maybe irritation. Before he could answer, his phone rang. I caught Tanya's name flashing bright. He turned away, lowering his voice, but the morning air carried words easy. "She won't budge yet." "Yeah, tonight maybe. We'll talk later." I looked down at the coffee in my hands. The steam curled like question marks. When he hung up, he forced another grin. "Tanya says hi." "I'm sure she does," I said. He kissed my cheek, quick and perfunctory, and walked off. The cologne he wore cost more than my light bill. When his car disappeared around the corner, the quiet rushed back in. Inside, the house felt smaller. I cleaned dishes I hadn't dirtied, watered plants that weren't thirsty, just to keep busy. Around noon, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the family photos again. In one, Marcus was 8, missing a front tooth, holding up a frog like it was treasure. In another, he was 16, arms draped over my shoulders after his basketball win. That boy looked at me like I hung the moon. Where did that boy go? The phone rang. I jumped. "Hello? Miss Miles? This is Candace from Atlanta Mutual. I'm just confirming. You still want your homeowner's policy to list Marcus Miles as sole beneficiary? My fingers tightened on the receiver. I never changed that. Oh, her keyboard clacked faintly. We received updated forms last week, signed under your name. I didn't sign anything, honey, she hesitated. Then you may want to come by our office to verify. Could be a clerical error. Could be, I said, and thanked her. When I hung up, my pulse thudded in my ears. I went straight to the drawer in my bedroom, the one where I kept all my papers neatly stacked inside an old cookie tin. The tin was still there, but the envelope with my insurance documents was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. For a moment, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I moved it. Maybe Marcus had borrowed it to make a copy. Maybe. But deep down, the truth had already settled like dust. That evening, just as the sun was melting behind the trees, headlights swept across my living room window. Marcus again. He came in holding a bakery box. Brought you some pie, he said cheerfully, the same line Tanya had used last night. Another one? He laughed a touch too loud. Guess we both had the same idea. He set it on the counter. You eating all right? You've lost weight. I'm fine, baby. Sit down a while. He did, glancing around as if taking inventory. You still using those space heaters? Sometimes. Might want to unplug them. Dangerous things. Uh-huh. I stirred sugar into my tea, each clink measured. Marcus, did you come by last week for my papers? His jaw twitched. What papers? Insurance. He smiled, all teeth. Oh, that. Tanya was helping organize your bills. You know she loves handling that kind of stuff. We just made copies. Copies, I echoed. Then I should still have the originals, right? He blinked once, twice. Must have mixed 'em up. I'll bring them next time. The lie slid off his tongue, smooth as honey. I'd heard enough dying men in hospital beds to know the sound of denial. It has a rhythm. He stood abruptly. Gotta run. Meeting a client. I walked him to the door. When he leaned in to kiss my cheek, I caught a whiff of smoke on his jacket. Not cigarette smoke, heavier, mechanical. Like burnt wiring. Be careful, Marcus, I said softly. Always am, Ma. When the door closed, I locked it and leaned against it, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, the faint rattle of the vents. The air smelled different again. Faint gas, metallic and sour. I turned off the heater completely, opened the kitchen window, and sat down at the table with that untouched pie between us like a peace offering gone bad. The wind picked up outside, rattling the shutters. Somewhere in that noise I thought I heard Marcus's voice from years ago. Don't worry. Mom, I'd never let anything happen to you. Funny how memory plays tricks. I blew out the candle on the table, and for a brief moment the dark felt safer than the light. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of rain tapping my bedroom window like nervous fingers. Atlanta rain always smells of iron and memory. Sweet at first, then heavy, the way grief sneaks up after a funeral. I lay there listening to it, feeling the emptiness of the house breathe around me. It's funny how silence can start to sound like warning. After the call from that insurance lady, sleep hadn't come easy. I kept seeing Marcus's face, the easy charm, the too bright smile, the way his eyes flickered when I mentioned those missing papers. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but mothers don't stop knowing their children, no matter how old they get, and I knew when mine was lying. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring at the pie Tanya brought. It sat there untouched, its crust beginning to sag. I pushed it aside, pulled out my checkbook, and went through the drawers again. My fingers moved automatically, sorting through old bills, postcards, church bulletins, all the little proof that a life existed. The envelope with my insurance documents was still gone. What I did find, though, was a faint smear of black grease on the edge of the drawer handle. Not my doing. A knock startled me. I froze. But it wasn't the door, just the sound of the porch swing bumping the wall in the wind. Still, my heart had leapt like it used to when Marcus got hurt as a boy. Instinct never leaves you. It just gets quieter. By noon, the rain had stopped. The sky turned that dull color between gray and gold. I got in my old Buick and drove down to the insurance office myself. Candace greeted me with the kind of smile folks reserve for their elders, polite, a touch condescending. Miss Miles, good to see you. Did you bring your ID? Right here. She typed something on her computer, brow furrowing. Huh? It shows your policy was updated last week, signed electronically. I leaned forward. Show me the signature. She turned the screen slightly. My name curved across the form in careful loops. Perfect. Too perfect. I'd signed enough medical charts in my life to know. Nobody writes that neat twice in a row. That's not mine, I said quietly. Would you like us to open an internal review? Not yet. Just print me a copy, please. Candace printed it, stapled it neatly. I slipped it into my purse. As I thanked her and turned to go, she said, "Oh, and congratulations. Your son also added you to his life insurance. Said he wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of." I stopped mid-step. He added me? She nodded, cheerful as could be. That's a good boy you raised. I managed a smile that hurt my cheeks. Yes, a good boy. Back home, the air inside the house felt different. Still too still. I left my purse by the door and went straight to the kitchen. The faint smell of gas was back, stronger this time. My heart thudded once, twice. I moved slowly, careful not to turn on any lights, careful not to spark anything. I walked to the stove, crouched low, sniffed the pilot light. It burned steady, but the smell was leaking from somewhere else. The heater vent by the pantry. That was new. I stood up, trying to keep my breathing calm. I knew enough about gas to know one wrong move could turn this place into kindling. I opened every window I could reach, coughing into my sleeve. That's when my phone buzzed. "Hey, Ma," Marcus said, voice smooth as ever. "You home?" "I am." "Good. I was thinking, Tanya's making dinner tonight. You should come by. We miss you," I almost laughed. "You miss me? Since when?" "Come on now. Don't be like that." His voice was too careful, too polite, like he was walking through a script. "What time?" I asked. 8. Don't worry about bringing anything. Just yourself. I could almost hear Tanya whispering in the background, then a muffled giggle. "All right," I said slowly. "I'll see y'all then." When I hung up, I stood there a long time, the smell of gas seeping into everything. The curtains, my clothes, my skin. Something in me shifted then. Fear, maybe. But underneath it, something sharper. A nurse learns to tell the difference between panic and instinct. Panic shakes you. Instinct steadies you. And right then, my hands stopped trembling. I walked to the back room, the one Marcus called my hoarder's den. It wasn't hoarding. It was memory. Boxes stacked high with photo albums, journals, receipts, all the tiny breadcrumbs of a life lived honestly. From one of those boxes, I pulled out a small black flash drive. My old nanny Cam used to record onto it, years ago, when break-ins were common in the neighborhood. I hadn't used it in ages, but I remembered exactly where it was. Plugging it into my laptop, I waited. The screen flickered, and grainy footage filled the display. The kitchen at night. Empty. Then movement, a tall shadow crossing the frame. My son, Marcus. He moved like a thief in his own mother's home, wearing gloves. I watched him kneel by the heater vent, tools glinting faintly. A second figure hovered by the back door. Tanya, her face half turned toward the camera. They left together after 10 minutes. The footage ended. I didn't move for a while. Just sat there letting the silence swell until it felt solid. Then I unplugged the drive, slipped it into my pocket, and looked around the room. The photos on the walls, the quilt folded on the couch, the vase of fading lilies Tanya gave me last Mother's Day. Everything in this house told a story. But tonight, the story would change. When the clock hit 6, I made myself another cup of tea. Chamomile again. My hands were steady now. I didn't know exactly what Marcus had planned for me that night, but one thing I did know. He thought he understood his mother. He thought I was soft, predictable, weak. He forgot who raised him. He forgot that before I was anybody's mother, I was a survivor. And if he wanted to test that, well, I'd be ready. That night felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was holding its breath. The sky outside was clear, yet thunder rumbled far off, as if the weather knew something I didn't. I'd spent the whole afternoon pretending to believe Marcus's invitation was real. Smiled through our short calls, said all the right "see you soons." But inside, I'd already decided I wasn't leaving this house tonight. I was staying right here and watching what would come for me. By 8, the street was dark except for the soft orange glow from my porch light. I sat on the edge of my bed, dressed nice just in case. Navy dress. Pearls Maria from church said made me look queenly. My hair wrapped neat. Slippers by the door. When the clock struck 8:30, I knew they weren't expecting me at dinner. That invitation was never about food. It was about timing. Still, I waited. Around 9:10, a car rolled slow past my window. Headlights swept the living room walls, paused, then moved on. I recognized the hum of Marcus's engine. Quiet, expensive, trying too hard to sound innocent. I didn't move. I just sat there, hand resting on the little cross pendant around my neck. Maria gave me that pendant when Marcus was born. So you remember God sees in the dark, she said. Tonight, I hoped she was right. 10 minutes later, a faint click sounded from the back of the house. Not a bang or crash, just a delicate, deliberate click, like a door easing shut. I turned off my bedside lamp. The only light left came from the hallway night bulb, a soft amber glow painting long shadows across the floor. The smell came next. Sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Gas, stronger this time, crawling under the door like something alive. My first instinct was to run. My second was to listen. The silence behind that smell was too complete. No footsteps, no voice. Just the low hiss from the heater vent and the steady tick of the hallway clock, counting down God knows what. I moved slow, keeping one hand on the wall to steady myself. Each step felt like walking through molasses. My knees ached, but I didn't dare make noise. I reached the kitchen. The pilot light on the stove flickered calm, blue and steady. But the air shimmered faintly around the vent by the pantry, the same one I'd seen Marcus kneeling beside on that recording. My throat burned when I whispered, "Lord, not like this." Then the first spark snapped. It wasn't even visible, just a sound. A pop from the socket near the refrigerator. But it was enough. The flash was white, then orange. The world cracked open. I stumbled backward as the curtains caught, fire climbing them like a ladder. The blast knocked me off balance. Heat slammed my face. I hit the floor hard, head ringing. The house filled with a roar that sounded almost like laughter, wood splitting, glass exploding, everything I'd built turning traitor. I crawled. Couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Smoke wrapped me tight, hot and oily. I pressed my sleeve to my mouth, coughing, eyes streaming. The front door was only 15 feet away, but it might as well have been another world. The doorknob burned my palm when I reached it. I screamed, a short, ugly sound swallowed by the noise. My body moved on instinct, turning toward the back bathroom window. It was small, barely big enough for a child. But I wasn't thinking of measurements. I was thinking of air. I grabbed a towel, wrapped my hands, and punched at the glass. Once, twice until it cracked. The shards bit deep into my arm, but cold night air rushed in, sweet and shocking. Outside, the crickets had gone silent. I squeezed through the frame, skin scraping, shoulder catching on the sill. For a moment I thought I'd get stuck, that this would be how they found me, halfway between life and death. But the old stubborn strength that raised a son and buried a husband kicked in. With one final push, I tumbled into the mud. The grass was slick from yesterday's rain, the earth cool against my burned skin. Behind me, the house howled. Flames clawed through the roof, sparks flying into the dark like angry stars. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor shouted my name. "Miss Loretta!" "Lord, somebody call 911. I tried to answer, but my throat was full of smoke. I just raised a hand, shaking, half buried in the wet earth. The last thing I remember before the world dimmed was seeing my front window shatter outward, and, for a split second, a figure standing beyond the streetlights, tall, still, watching Marcus. He didn't run toward me. He didn't shout. He just stood there, frozen, like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he thought he had. When I woke, I was surrounded by white. Not clouds, hospital walls. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint char of smoke that clung to my hair. My arms were bandaged, one wrapped tight from wrist to elbow. My throat felt like sandpaper. A nurse hovered. "Miss Miles, you're safe now. The firefighters pulled you out of the backyard. You were lucky." Lucky. I wanted to laugh, but it came out a rasp. "Did anyone else get hurt?" She hesitated. No one was inside. "They said you live alone?" I nodded slowly. That's right. Alone. When she left, I closed my eyes and saw it again. The shadow in the street, my son standing still while his mother burned. That image didn't feel like luck. It felt like a promise. He thought the fire finished me. He didn't know it forged me. The first thing I remember after the fire was the sound of beeping. Slow, steady, patient. Machines keeping rhythm where my heart used to. Hospital ceilings are the same everywhere. Pale, cracked, humming faintly with old electricity. I'd spent half my life working under those lights, caring for other people. I never thought I'd end up under them myself, smelling of smoke and betrayal. When I tried to move, pain flared through my arm and ribs. My voice came out rough when I whispered, "Water." A nurse leaned over, young girl, kind eyes, dark curls tucked behind her ears. "Don't talk too much, Miss Miles. You inhaled a lot of smoke." She lifted the cup gently, helped me sip. Cool water hit my tongue like mercy. "How long?" I croaked. 3 days. "They said you're lucky." There it was again. That word, lucky. If surviving what your child meant to finish counts as luck, then I guess I hit the jackpot. When she left, I stared at the flowers on the windowsill. Lilies. I used to love their smell. Now it made me sick. By afternoon, the doctor came in. "We'll keep you a few more nights, Miss Miles. Mild smoke inhalation, partial burns, dehydration. You're tougher than you look. I've been hearing that all my life," I said. He smiled and left. Later that evening, I heard footsteps approach, 2 sets, one soft, one confident. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Marcus walked in holding a bouquet, Tanya trailing behind him like a shadow in heels. His face carried that performance mask, grief smeared on too neatly. "Ma," he said softly, "thank God you're okay." I studied him. No soot on his hands, no circles under his eyes, no tremor in his voice, just polished concern. Tanya placed the flowers beside the lilies. "We've been so worried," she said. "I bet," I rasped. He pulled a chair closer, leaning forward. "The firefighters said the gas line probably malfunctioned. I told you that heater was old." "You did," I said, nodding. "I guess you were right." He looked relieved that I wasn't accusing. "The good news is insurance will cover most of it. I've already started filing the claim for you. We'll rebuild, Ma. Better this time, safer." He squeezed my hand. It took everything I had not to jerk away. Tanya chimed in, voice sugary. "You can stay with us until it's fixed." We set up the guest room already. Fresh sheets, your favorite tea, everything. I smiled faintly. "That's kind of you." Inside, my mind was already working, cold and sharp as a scalpel. They thought I was blind with gratitude. But I'd seen the way Marcus's hand twitched when I mentioned the heater. I'd noticed the faint chemical stain on his cuff, the same kind of residue I'd seen on burn victims who tried to fix things they shouldn't. I wasn't a fool. Just a woman who'd given the wrong people too much faith. When they finally left, I waited until the hallway lights dimmed and the nurses settled at their station. Then I reached for my purse, charred around the edges but still intact. The flash drive was gone, but I'd tucked a second copy deep inside the lining before the fire. Old habits die hard. I'd learned from decades of keeping medication samples safe from theft. The USB stick was scratched, but not melted. I held it like a relic. My proof. The next morning, Detective Williams showed up. Mid-40s, graying beard, tired eyes, the kind of man who's seen too many tragedies to believe in coincidence. "Mrs. Miles," he said, flipping his badge. "Glad to see you pulling through. I need to ask a few questions about the fire." "Of course. Any idea what caused it?" "Gas leak," I said, echoing Marcus's line. "Heater's been acting funny." He nodded, but didn't write it down. "You live alone?" "Yes. Any recent visitors?" I hesitated. "My son and his wife a few times." "Why?" He scratched his jaw. "Just routine. Fire crew found some unusual marks on the vent pipes. Looks like someone tampered with them. We'll run a full report." "Tampered?" I repeated softly. "Could be anything," he said quickly. "Loose fittings, maybe. We'll know soon." I nodded, pretending confusion instead of understanding. "Thank you, Detective. You let me know what you find." He studied me for a moment, like he sensed the quiet storm behind my calm. Then he tipped his hat and left. That night, when the nurses dimmed the lights again, I lay awake listening to the machines hum. Every sound, the squeak of shoes in the hall, The drip of the IV became part of a strange new rhythm, grief, suspicion, resolve, all beating together in time with the monitor. Somewhere around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Marcus. Love you, Ma. Glad you're still here. We'll talk tomorrow. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I typed back, me. Yes, still here. That was all. I locked the phone and closed my eyes. I could almost hear his voice when he said goodbye that night before the fire. See you soon, Ma. It wasn't a promise. It was a eulogy, but he made one mistake. He forgot that survival is what mothers do best. When dawn came, I felt different. Not stronger, colder, focused. My body still hurt, but my spirit was steady. I'd spent years helping patients recover from the worst pain life could give. Now, I understood what it felt like to be one of them. The difference was, I wasn't waiting to heal. I was preparing to act, and when I left that hospital, Marcus was going to learn what it felt like when a mother stops protecting you and starts remembering everything you did. When they discharged me, the nurse hugged me like she was sending off a relative. You sure you don't want to stay one more night, Miss Miles? She asked. I've stayed enough nights in other people's care, I said. Time I start taking care of myself again. Outside, the air was cool and smelled of rain. Spring was teasing its way into Atlanta, magnolia buds on trees, damp earth underfoot. The world looked clean, too clean for someone who'd just crawled out of a fire. Marcus offered to pick me up. I declined, told him a friend from church would drive me. That friend was real, Geneva, 71. Retired lawyer with a spine of iron and a tongue sharp enough to file nails. She pulled up in her silver Lincoln, leaned across the seat and said, You ready, Loretta? As I'll ever be. When we turned down my street, I could already smell it, that sour mix of smoke, wet plaster, and memory. My house sat there, blackened bones against the pale morning, windows gaping, roof half gone, caution tape fluttering like yellow ribbons of shame. I stepped out slowly, my knees stiff. The cane Geneva insisted I bring clicking against the pavement. Lord, she whispered. I thought they'd at least boarded it up better. I guess they didn't expect me to come home, I said. The fence leaned like it was morning. My azalea bushes were nothing but brittle sticks. I walked up the cracked path and stood at the front steps, what was left of them. For a second my throat tightened, but the tears didn't come. I'd spent them all already. A firefighter stationed nearby nodded respectfully. You Miss Miles? Yes. Ma'am, we're still waiting on the final report, but off the record? That gas line was tampered with. Clean work, too. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. I met his eyes. Thank you for telling me. He looked surprised, maybe expecting shock or outrage. All I gave him was calm. When he left, Geneva touched my arm. Loretta, I know that look. Don't do anything stupid, I smiled faintly. At my age, baby, everything looks stupid until it works. Inside, the house was quiet as a grave. The scent of charred wood hit first, then something else, faint but distinct. Gasoline. The walls were ghosted with soot, furniture warped beyond saving. My mother's quilt, the one she'd made when I had Marcus, was burned halfway through. But the name stitched in the corner, Love Always, was still there. That's when the realization hit me fully. He hadn't just tried to kill me, he'd tried to erase me. I spent hours there, picking through the ruins with gloves and patience. Some part of me cataloged the damage like a nurse taking vitals. Walls, third-degree burns. Memories, irreversible loss. Faith, still beating. When I found what I was looking for, I almost laughed. Behind the melted frame of the pantry shelf, still sealed in a metal box, lay my old safe. Scorched, dented, but not destroyed. It had belonged to my husband James, back when he ran his small carpentry business. I'd almost forgotten about it. Inside were documents, my late husband's insurance papers, birth certificates, a few faded photos, and something else. An old flash drive labeled Camera B. My breath caught. The main drive I'd watched before the fire had the footage from the kitchen. But James had installed 2 cameras years ago, one in the hallway by the back door. Camera B, I took it and slipped it into my coat pocket. The small weight felt like a heartbeat. Geneva helped me settle into her spare room that night. She poured me tea and waited. She always did know when silence needed space before questions. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but direct. "You think Marcus had something to do with it, don't you?" I stared into the tea, watching the steam twist. "I don't think, Geneva." "I know. Evidence? Enough to burn him without a match." "Then let me help you. I still know people, cops, lawyers. But promise me you'll do this the right way. I promise." She looked at me for a long time, like she could see the lie hiding under the truth. Then she sighed. "All right, Loretta. But if you're going to walk into this storm, at least carry an umbrella," I smiled. "Oh, I plan to carry lightning." The next morning, I plugged camera B into Geneva's old laptop. The footage was clear enough to make my pulse trip. Timestamp: the night of the fire, 9:22 p.m. The back door opened. Marcus stepped in, flashlight beam sweeping the hallway. He wore gloves, baseball cap low. Behind him, Tanya lingered by the car. He knelt, twisted something under the floor vent, then wiped his hands on a rag. He turned toward the camera. For half a second, the light caught his face. Calm, focused, familiar. Then he smiled. That smile was what broke me. Not the crime, not the betrayal, the ease. He looked comfortable. Like this wasn't evil. It was efficiency. I shut the laptop and pressed my palms together, whispering the only prayer I had left. "Lord, give me patience. Just not the kind that forgets." 2 days later, Marcus called again. "Ma, how you holding up?" "I'm all right," I said. "Just trying to piece things together. Feels strange losing a home. I can imagine. Listen, insurance needs a few more signatures from you. I'll stop by tomorrow, bring the papers." "Of course, baby. Tomorrow sounds fine." "Good. Tanya's been worried sick, you know." "I'm sure she has." When I hung up, I could almost hear his relief through the static. He still believed I was the same woman who made him Sunday breakfast and prayed for his safety. He didn't know the difference between mercy and silence. That night, Geneva found me at the table, sorting papers into neat stacks. Bank statements, insurance records, copies of everything. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making sure when my son comes tomorrow, he finds what he's looking for." She frowned. "Which is?" "The truth," I said, folding one last document. "He's been feeding me lies. Time I return the favor. With interest?" I didn't know exactly how the next part would play out. But I knew one thing. Marcus thought he'd burn down my house. He didn't realize I was about to burn down his world. The next morning arrived pale and hushed. The kind of quiet that feels like the world's holding its breath. I woke early at Geneva's place, made us both coffee, and sat by the window watching fog slide through the neighborhood. For the first time since the fire, my mind felt clear. People think anger roars. It doesn't. It whispers. It organizes. I spent that morning whispering with myself. First thing, I made a list. Not a to-do list, but a reckoning. Every dollar I'd ever loaned Marcus. Every late-night favor. Every lie he'd fed me. The numbers bled into the margin, impossible to total. I wasn't counting money anymore. I was counting disrespect. Geneva came into the kitchen in her robe, raising an eyebrow when she saw me writing. "You planning a sermon or a lawsuit?" "Maybe both," I said. She chuckled and poured herself coffee. "You're dangerous when you're quiet." Then it's been a long time coming. Around noon, I went downtown to see Detective Williams. I brought a copy of the video, printed photos, and a folder so thick it could choke a man. He watched the footage twice, jaw tightening. "This your son?" "It was," I said. He leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Miles, this is serious, but I'll be honest. Unless we can prove intent, that he planned to harm you for profit, the DA might hesitate. Fires get labeled accidents all the time," I nodded slowly. "What if I told you he forged my signature on insurance papers?" Williams raised an eyebrow. "You got proof?" I slid the copy across the desk. My forged name stared up at him. He whistled low. "You're thorough. I was a nurse 35 years. You learn to document everything," he smiled grimly. "I'll open a case file. But Mrs. Miles, don't confront him yourself." "Promise me that." I didn't answer. Just said, "Do what you can, detective." When I left, I felt something I hadn't in months. Control. That evening, Geneva and I sat on her porch while the sun dipped low. She handed me a glass of sweet tea and said, "So what's the next step, Miss Strategist?" I let him think he's winning, she frowned. You sure that's wise? I don't need wisdom, I said quietly. I need closure. Geneva studied me. Just make sure your closure doesn't come with handcuffs. I smiled. Don't worry. I'm not the one breaking the law. The next day, Marcus showed up. He was dressed sharp as always. Blue suit, white shirt, no tie. Tanya sat in the car outside, engine running, sunglasses on. Hey, Ma. He stepped onto Geneva's porch, holding a folder. Got the insurance documents. They just need your signature. I looked him over, all polished guilt and fake charm. Come in, I said. He hesitated, eyes flicking to Geneva's curtains. Maybe out here's fine. Scared of my old friend? He laughed awkwardly. No, of course not. I opened the folder, flipped through the papers slowly. The air smelled faintly of cologne and lies. These forms say you're managing the reconstruction, I said. You taking over the claim? Just the logistics, he said quickly. You shouldn't stress yourself. I looked up and smiled. I won't, his phone buzzed. He ignored it, watching me sign. My pen hovered above the paper, then I signed, slowly and neatly, but the ink was dry before it touched the form. Geneva had shown me how to use a disappearing ink pen. When I handed it back, Marcus grinned. Thanks, Ma. You'll see, everything's going to be okay. Oh, I know it will, I said. He walked off, whistling, oblivious. Tanya didn't even glance my way as they drove off. Geneva came out the moment the car disappeared. Please tell me that wasn't your real signature. Not even close. Loretta, she said, shaking her head. You're scaring me. In a good way. That night I lit a candle and sat in the quiet. The flame wavered, soft and gold. Lord, I whispered, you gave me this fire once before and I survived it. Now I'm using it. I wasn't rushing toward revenge. I was walking toward justice, steady, step by step. Marcus wanted to play with fire. I was about to show him who taught him how to hold a match. The next week unfolded like a chess game only I could see. Every move had purpose, every word a test. Marcus kept calling, checking on me, pretending concern, always asking, did you get the insurance check yet? Each time I'd say, they're processing it, baby. Each time he'd sigh with fake patience. Meanwhile, Geneva and Detective Williams were doing the real work. Williams confirmed the forgery, the insurance fraud, the tampering report. Geneva had friends at the courthouse who slipped her quiet updates. The pieces were aligning, but I wasn't content with legal punishment. Legal meant quiet. I wanted truth, loud and undeniable, in the same way. Marcus tried to make my death clean and invisible, so I started planning a scene he couldn't escape. It started with a dinner invitation. I called Marcus one evening, voice soft, trembling just enough to sound fragile. Baby, I've been thinking. You were right. Maybe I should thank you for all you've done. He sounded surprised, then cautious. What do you mean? I want to host a small dinner. Just family. You, Tanya, maybe a few of your friends from church. My treat, he hesitated. You sure you're up for that? I'm sure, I said. This time let me feed you, he chuckled. All right, Ma. I'll tell Tanya to plan the menu. Oh no, I said lightly. I already have one. The night of the dinner arrived crisp and bright. I rented a small event hall near the lake, cozy and old-fashioned. Geneva helped me decorate. White tablecloths, soft lighting, gospel playing low. I wanted warmth, peace, nostalgia. The kind of place where a mother might forgive her child. Marcus and Tanya arrived first, surprised at how put together everything looked. Tanya's smile wobbled when she saw Geneva seated near the head of the table. Didn't know this was such a formal gathering, she said. Just a few people I love, I replied, and a few who need reminding what love looks like. One by one, the guests arrived. Marcus's business associates, Tanya's real estate friends, 2 church elders. 12 people total, the same number that used to fill my dining table on holidays before greed took my son's place at it. Dinner started polite, laughter, compliments about the food. I kept my smile small, steady. Geneva watched me like a hawk, nervous but trusting. Halfway through the meal, I stood up. My cane clicked once against the floor. Before dessert, I said, I'd like to share something. Marcus froze mid-bite. Ma? I opened my handbag, pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on the table. This is a little family album I've been putting together. Memories, receipts, proof. Laughter died around the table. I began passing the documents one by one, bank transfers, forged forms, screenshots. 5 years of me paying for houses I didn't live in. Papers I never signed. Things I gave out of love that turned into weapons. Tanya's fork clattered. This is insane. I ignored her, pulling out one last item, a printed photo still frame of Marcus kneeling by my gas vent. The room went dead quiet. Geneva leaned forward. You all recognize that room, right? That's Miss Loretta's kitchen. Before it burned, Marcus's face drained of color. This is fake. I looked him in the eye. The police already confirmed it's real. But don't worry. They'll call you after dinner. Detective Williams said he wanted to give you time to eat. A few guests gasped. Tanya stood up, hand shaking. You can't just accuse us. I'm not accusing, I said calmly. I'm informing. There's a difference. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all my years settle steady in my bones. You tried to turn me into ash, Marcus, but I rose, and I brought witnesses. The old pastor from church whispered, Lord have mercy. Marcus's voice cracked. You set me up. I smiled, gentle, tired. No, son, you set yourself up. I just lit the truth so everyone could see. He grabbed the folder, flipping through the evidence with frantic hands. You can't. The ink disappears, I said softly. Just like the signatures you forged. The room erupted. Whispers, gasps, Tanya crying, guests backing away. Geneva stood beside me, calm as a judge. Marcus looked at me one last time. That same expression he'd had in the street the night of the fire. Disbelief. You should have just died, he whispered. I did, I said. The night you lit that match. But what came out of those flames wasn't your mother. It was justice. Right then, the door opened. Detective Williams stepped in quietly, 2 officers behind him. Marcus Miles? Tanya sobbed as they cuffed him. I turned to the guests, voice steady. Enjoy dessert, everyone. It's pecan pie, his favorite, sweet enough to end bitter things. The sound of those handcuffs clicked louder in my mind than the fire ever did. That cold metallic rhythm. It didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like closure. Marcus didn't fight as the officers led him outside. Tanya screamed something about lawyers, innocence. This is a setup, but nobody was listening. The guests had gone silent, eyes wide and lips tight. The kind of silence that only follows truth too heavy to digest. Geneva placed a steady hand on my arm. You all right? I nodded, though my knees wobbled. It's strange, I whispered. You dream of a moment for so long, and when it comes, it feels quiet. Justice usually does, she said. The hall emptied slowly. Only the echo of footsteps and Tanya's sobs remained. When the last guest left, I asked Geneva to give me a moment alone. She hesitated, then nodded. You sure? Yes, I need to see him once more, before the police take him downtown. She sighed, then squeezed my hand and stepped outside. Marcus was standing near the kitchen door, the same way he'd been the night of the fire, only this time no shadows could hide him. 2 officers waited at the exit while Detective Williams finished speaking quietly into his radio. Could I have 1 minute with my son? I asked. Williams studied me, then nodded. 1 minute. When he left us, Marcus turned, wrists bound, jaw tight. You really think you've won, don't you? I looked at him for a long moment. The boy I raised still flickered somewhere behind those eyes, but it was dim, fading. Win, I said softly. There's no winning when it's your child on the other side of justice, he scoffed. You think this makes you a hero? You embarrassed me, my business, my friends. You ruined my life. No, baby, I said. You did that the moment you forgot who gave it to you. His voice cracked. You never understand. You gave everything away, Mom. All your savings, all your time, and for what? For some house that was falling apart? For your pride? I stepped closer. The cuffs clinked between us like punctuation. That house wasn't pride, Marcus. It was history. Your father built those walls with his hands. I fed you on that porch, and you tried to turn it into a grave. He swallowed hard, his eyes flicking to the floor. You were supposed to be gone. You weren't supposed to. See? I did, I said. And now so will everyone else. Tears welled, but they didn't fall. I'd already cried enough to fill rivers. He shook his head almost to himself. You'll regret this. When the trial starts, when they dig through everything, they'll twist it. They'll make you the crazy one. I'm fine being called crazy, I said quietly. At least I'm alive to hear it. For a moment, he looked small again. That same boy who used to hide behind my legs when thunder struck. Then he laughed bitterly. You could have just let me go. Started over. I did start over, I said. The moment you lit that match, the officers re-entered. Williams gestured gently. I reached out, touched Marcus's arm one last time. Goodbye, son. He flinched but didn't pull away. His eyes met mine, and for the briefest second, guilt flickered there. Not love, not regret, just the recognition that he'd lost something he could never rebuild. Goodbye, Mom, he said quietly. Then he turned away. When the door opened and they led him out into the night, his face went pale, the orange glow from the hall lights washing over him just like the fire he'd started. For a moment, I almost pitied him, almost. Then the door shut, and I let the silence wrap me up. Geneva came back in, slow, careful. He's gone? Yes, I said. And so is the fear, she nodded. Then let's go home. But home wasn't a place anymore. It was a decision, to never again live where someone else controlled the lock. The news spread, fast, local business owner, and wife arrested on arson and fraud charges. That headline danced across every Atlanta paper and morning show for a week. The reporters parked outside Geneva's gate, flashing cameras and shouting questions like vultures circling roadkill. I ignored them, didn't owe them my story, but I watched the trial on TV. Every minute of it. They played the video of Marcus and Tanya in the courtroom, the one from my camera. The jurors leaned forward, expressions tight. When Tanya saw herself on screen, she started crying so hard the judge had to call a recess. Marcus sat there stone-faced, his jaw working, eyes hollow. When they asked me to testify, I walked into that courtroom wearing a cream suit and the same pearls that had survived the fire. The smell of disinfectant and sweat filled the air. A courtroom always has the scent of fear. No matter who's on trial, I told the truth, slowly, clearly, no dramatics. I loved my son, I said into the microphone. I still do, but love without accountability isn't love. It's surrender. The room stayed silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. Then I looked directly at Marcus. You set that fire thinking you'd inherit my peace. You forgot I never built it on paper. I built it inside me. He didn't look up, didn't blink, just sat there, shoulders stiff, hands folded. When the verdict came, I didn't smile. I didn't clap. I just breathed, guilty on all counts. Tanya tried to plead out, but there was too much evidence. Insurance fraud, conspiracy, attempted homicide. Marcus got 15 years. Tanya got 7. Justice doesn't erase pain, but it does clear the air. After the trial, neighbors came by, folks I hadn't seen since before the fire. They brought casseroles, flowers, too many hugs. Everyone had something to say. You're so strong. We're proud of you. He'll learn one day, but strength isn't pride. It's survival dressed in Sunday clothes. I went back to the site of my house one last time. The land was clean now, ashes hauled away, foundation bare. The grass had started growing again, wild and green. I stood there barefoot, toes pressing into the soft soil. The wind carried the faint smell of magnolia and earth. I forgive you, I whispered into the wind. Not for him. For me, because hate, like fire, only grows if you feed it. Geneva helped me move into a small lakeside house 2 towns over. Peaceful, quiet. Some mornings, I sit on the porch and watch the sunrise dance across the water. It's funny, the sound of crackling fire used to haunt me. Now, when I hear the wood stove in winter, it feels different. Controlled, safe. I keep one photo on my mantle. Marcus at 8 years old, missing tooth, frog in hand, sunlight on his face. It's half burned from the fire, the edges curled like the page of a book that refused to finish burning. I never threw it away. That photo reminds me that love can't be rewritten, only survived. A letter came last month, from prison. His handwriting shaky. Ma, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to know if you still pray for me. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and tucked it into my Bible. Then I whispered, every night. Because prayer isn't always about asking for miracles. Sometimes it's just sending a little light into a dark place, even if the one sitting in that darkness deserves it. Now, when people ask how I survived, I tell them the truth. Fire doesn't just destroy. It reveals, it burns away lies, masks, weakness, until only truth stands naked in the smoke. And when my son lit that fire, he didn't just expose his sins. He forged my freedom. People think healing starts the day the pain ends. It doesn't. It starts the day you decide the pain won't be the only story left of you. After the trial, I disappeared for a while. Geneva called it a sabbatical for the soul. I packed what little I had, clothes, my Bible, that half-burned photo of Marcus as a boy, and moved into a small lakeside cottage 2 towns over. The house sat low under a willow tree, its porch facing the water. Mornings there smelled of pine and clean air, not smoke. At first I didn't know what to do with the quiet. The hum of city traffic had been replaced by frogs and the slap of water against the dock. Some nights, I'd wake from dreams of heat, the hiss of gas, the crackle of flames, and sit trembling until dawn painted the lake gold. But slowly, the world began to sound different again, gentler. Geneva visited every Sunday. She'd bring peach cobbler and sit on my porch, talking about everything except the trial. "You ever think about going back to nursing?" she asked once. I laughed softly. "At my age, child, I'd be the one on the gurney, not beside it," she smiled. "Then maybe you just need a new kind of healing work." I didn't answer, but her words stayed with me. That week, I started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. They needed someone to help organize medical supplies, check vitals, talk to newcomers. Most of the women who came in had been burned in their own way, by fists, by lies, by people they trusted. They didn't need sermons. They needed someone who understood what it's like to lose your foundation and still stand. One afternoon, a young woman named Alana sat beside me while I labeled bandages. "You talk about him sometimes," she said. "Your son used to," I said quietly. She nodded. "I got one too. He hates me right now. Says I ruined his life." I looked at her, bruised, tired, but still fighting to stay soft, then keep living. Time's the only truth kids can't argue with. She smiled, a small cracked thing, and squeezed my hand. That moment reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Love doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. Every few weeks I'd get letters from Marcus. Never asking for pity, just thoughts, regret written in shaky pen strokes. "Ma, I think about the smell of that house. I think about Dad's old toolbox. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was wanting more. Maybe it was fear. I hope you're somewhere peaceful." I never wrote back, but I read every line. He was serving time, but so was I. Only my sentence was quieter. One evening, I drove back to the old neighborhood. The lot where my house once stood had turned into a community garden. Rows of tomatoes, collard greens, and sunflowers stood where the kitchen used to be. A group of kids were watering plants with plastic cans, their laughter bright and unscarred. A woman waved from the fence. "You Miss Miles?" "Yes, ma'am. We've been tending this spot in your honor," she said. Figured something good should grow where something awful happened. My throat tightened. "That's beautiful. Stop by any time," she said. "You got roots here, honey." "Real ones," I smiled, tears warming my eyes for the first time in a long time. Because that's when it hit me. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your rebuilding. That night, back at the lake house, I made a simple dinner, catfish, cornbread, greens. I set 2 plates out of habit, then laughed softly and put one away. Old habits linger like ghosts. When I sat to eat, the sunset stretched across the water, crimson, orange. Violet, fire turned to beauty. I whispered a prayer. "Lord, thank you for the kind of peace that doesn't need permission." And for the first time since that terrible night, I ate every bite. Rain came again months later, soft and patient, tapping the roof like an old friend, knocking gently. I sat in my armchair, wrapped in a blanket, reading the last letter Marcus sent. The ink had smudged from damp fingers. Maybe tears, maybe just prison rain. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I remember everything you taught me. The way you said love isn't something you buy, it's something you prove. I proved the wrong thing. I'm sorry, Ma. I folded it carefully, slid it beside the old photograph on my table. The photo's edges were curled and singed, but his smile, that innocent, gap-toothed grin, still glowed through the ash. Goodbye. Mom. Those had been his last words before the fire. For a long time, those words sounded like a curse. Now, they felt like a door finally closing, because sometimes goodbye isn't an ending. It's an opening for what comes after. The following Sunday, the shelter held a small potluck. We sat in a circle, women from all walks of life, sharing food, stories, small victories. When my turn came, Alana nudged me. "Tell them yours, Miss Loretta." I hesitated, then said, "My story's not about fire anymore. It's about light. There's a difference." They waited. "I used to think surviving made me strong," I said. "Now I know healing does. Strength keeps you alive. Healing lets you live." The women nodded. Some smiled. Some cried. I realized I wasn't just helping them. They were helping me remember who I was before betrayal. When I got home that evening, the lake was still. The surface mirrored the sky, gray clouds opening to a strip of pink. I stood on the porch and breathed deep. The scent of rain and earth filled my lungs. A whisper of wind brushed through the willow branches. For a moment, I imagined it carried Marcus's voice, softer, younger, unbroken by choices. "I still pray for you," I said aloud. The ripples spread across the lake, fading into quiet. Later that night, I lit a candle, not for mourning and for remembrance. The flame flickered steady, its glow catching the framed photo nearby. I spoke the words I'd been saving. Calm and certain, "You said goodbye, Mom." That night, I thought it meant the end. But it was really me who was saying goodbye. Goodbye to pain, to silence, to the version of myself that waited for your love. I smiled, tears sliding warm down my cheeks, and I mean it this time. As I set the candle by the window, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Fire had already tried to claim me and failed. Now, every spark I carried was mine, not destruction, but illumination. And as the rain began to fall again, I whispered the last line of my story, the one I knew would stay with me until the day I left this world. He tried to burn me out of his life. Instead, I burned my way free.